Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive into status and dominance. Today, we're going to see how hierarchies pop up, why humans are so into status, and how it all plays out, like, in our daily lives.
Yeah.
Get ready for some cool facts and insights.
Yeah. And you know what's really cool about today's deep dive?
What's that?
We're going to explain this stuff in a way that even if you've never heard of this topic before, it'll make sense. Like breaking it down super simply.
I love that. So, like, starting with the basics, I was reading about how these dominance hierarchies, they're not just a human thing. It's like all over the animal kingdom, even crickets, you know.
Totally. Crickets, chickens, even crayfish. All these animals are competing for resources, food, the deal. And dominance hierarchies are nature's way of saying, okay, here's who gets what, so no more fighting.
Right, keeps things orderly. But what I found super interesting was this research on crayfish. Like, get this. Their neuron activity actually changes based on if they win or lose a fight.
Isn't that wild? It's like their brains are literally rewiring themselves for dominance or submission. It's so crazy. So even in these simple creatures, there's this complex interplay between brain stuff, behavior, and all those social dynamics. It makes you wonder, how much of our own status-seeking behavior is hardwired or learned.
It's a big question, yeah.
Right.
A lot of research still needs to be done there. But before we jump fully into the human side, let's look at chimps.
Mm-hmm.
Their displays are so interesting, all those submissive greetings, the way the alpha walks around.
It's like a whole drama. But tell me, it's not just about brute strength, is it? I mean, to get to the top?
No, not at all. Dominance in chimp world is about more than just size. It's about social smarts and making alliances.
Makes sense. So the chimp who's best at navigating the social scene gets to the top.
Exactly. And top chimp gets more access to mates, passing on those genes.
Ah, evolution in action.
Yep. And speaking of evolution, when we look at humans, it's even more interesting. We don't just have one path to status. We have TWO, dominance and prestige.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to need you to unpack that one. What's the difference? Dominance, like we see in the animal world, is all about force or the threat of it. Think of the classic schoolyard bully, using intimidation.
Got it. So it's about power through fear, basically.
Yeah. But prestige, no, this one is about earning respect, through your skills, knowledge, what you contribute to the group.
Oh, so like the skilled hunter who brings back the food, or the wise elder offering guidance. People just look up to them, no threats needed.
You got it. And what's even cooler is prestige is often specific to a certain area. You might go to the best hunter for hunting advice, but to the best healer when you're sick.
Right. So everyone has their own area where they can shine. So just to recap, dominance is fear, prestige is admiration.
You got it.
Ah.
And now this is where it gets really cool, okay? There's this thing called costly signaling. It's key for getting prestige.
Okay, I'm all ears. Hit me with it. What is costly signaling?
Imagine a hunter-gatherer group. The best hunter, he throws this huge feast, sharing all the food. It's like he's showing off how good of a provider he is.
It's like a big, look at me, I'm successful ad.
Yeah.
But does it actually work, though? I mean, to get prestige?
There's actually studies showing that it does. Public displays of generosity, they make people's reputations go up. Like one study showed that people who donated to charity publicly were seen as more reputable than those who did it anonymously.
Wow, even if they gave the same amount. So it's not just about being good, but being seen being good.
Exactly. And this whole thing, this need for status and a good reputation, it can be so strong. One study even showed people would rather go to jail or even die than have their reputation ruined.
Whoa, no way. That's intense.
Right. Shows you how deep this need for status runs. So why are we so obsessed with it? To get that, we got to look at evolution.
Okay, let's do it. Let's go back in time.
You ready?
Ready.
All right, so to really get why we're so into status, we got to look at leadership.
Yeah.
See, leadership isn't just about bossing people around.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah.
Had plenty of bosses who gave orders but weren't real leaders, What's the connection to status then?
It's all about evolution. Leadership, it's like the strategy that evolved to help groups work together, solve problems, and ultimately survive.
Makes sense. Good leader, thriving group, everyone survives.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to status, right?
Bingo. There's this theory, the service for prestige theory, that explains it perfectly. Leaders, they provide important things, organization, knowledge, wisdom, and in return, they get prestige, respect. It's a win-win.
Gotcha. But how does someone even become a leader? Is it always just like the most dominant one?
Not always, no. Dominance can be part of it, especially when you need strength or, someone assertive. But there's more to it. Intelligence, competence, generosity, being able to inspire others, those are all important. Different situations, different leaders. Like wartime, you might need a strong, decisive leader. But peacetime, maybe someone wise and diplomatic is better.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not just about being the strongest, but having the right qualities for the job.
Right.
Okay, but let's talk about I guess the elephant in the room, or maybe the peacock. Why does it seem like guys are way more into status than women?
Great question. It probably goes back to evolution again. Think about it. For men, having higher status meant more access to mates, more chances to pass on those genes. So there was this huge pressure to climb that social ladder.
Right, so it's all about attracting a mate and making sure your genes survive. But, I mean, nowadays with monogamy and all, that drive shouldn't be as strong, right?
You'd think so. But even now, we see hints of that ancient drive. Studies show men with power and status, they tend to have more partners.
No way. So even now, when survival isn't tied to status, it still has that pull, especially for men.
It does, and you can even see it in kids. Boys, from a young age, they're more into those dominance contests, that rough and tumble play, like those nature shows where the young males are sparring, practicing for later.
Wow, those instincts are still there. But wait, if men are so status-driven, does that mean women don't care about it, ATLL?
Not at all. Both sexes care about status. It's a human thing. But the way it's expressed, that's different. Men, they're more, how do you say, overt, like actions, displays of power, that's their thing. But women, they're more about pro-social actions, stuff that benefits the group.
Interesting. So men, it's for personal gain, women for the group. Is there, like, a scientific way to measure this?
There is. There's this thing called social dominance orientation, or SDO. It basically measures how much someone agrees with hierarchy and inequality. And guess what? Men consistently score higher.
So on average, guys are more okay with the idea of some being on top, others at the bottom.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, and we can't forget about testosterone.
Right, the hormone of aggression and risk-taking.
Exactly. Testosterone is super important for dominance in men. It's linked to aggression, competitiveness, all that. And get this, testosterone levels actually change based on if you win or lose.
Really? Wait, like in anything competitive?
Yep. Physical stuff, even chess. Winners, testosterone goes up. Losers, it goes down.
Yeah.
Our bodies are reacting to status changes.
Wow. So testosterone pushes dominance, and achieving dominance pushes testosterone. It's like a loop.
It is. But what about the people who aren't at the top? What do they do?
Yeah, that's a good point. We've talked a lot about being dominant, but what about, not being dominant?
Exactly. It's not always about climbing up. Sometimes it's about navigating being lower down. One interesting idea is this thing called deceiving down.
Deceiving down. What's that?
It's basically the idea that people might downplay their skills, their achievements, so they don't seem like a threat to those in power. It's a way to stay safe.
So it's like, don't make waves, stay under the radar.
Right. And then there's this other thing, the tall poppy syndrome.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. What was it again?
It's that thing where people, they kind of enjoy it when someone successful messes up, especially if they think that person got there unfairly.
Right. Like the saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall.
Yep. So sometimes it's not about climbing, but about pulling others down. Understanding these strategies, that's key to really getting how status works.
Totally. But so far, it's all been about the internal stuff, right? The biology, the psychology.
Yeah.
But what about, like, the external stuff, the signals?
Great point. Nonverbal cues are huge for how we see and project status. Dominant people, they often have these behaviors that just scream, I'm in charge.
Like what? Give me examples. I'm all about this silent language of status.
Think about it. Taking up space, standing tall, direct eye contact, big gestures, speaking loud and low, interrupting others, even touching them more. It's like they're claiming their space.
Like they're saying, this is my territory.
Exactly, and it projects confidence, power, And on the other side, submissive people, they do the opposite, making themselves small, looking away, speaking softly, not interrupting.
It's like a whole dance, dominance, and submission.
It is. Oh, and one more thing. Studies have shown that for men, walking faster is actually linked to higher status.
Really? That's so cool. Like, even in something so simple, we see evolution at work.
It's like speed and efficiency. They're seen as signs of ambition, drive.
I wonder if people subconsciously adjust their walking speed, like, depending on who they're with.
Could be. And it's funny, because even though physical strength isn't as important for survival now, Physical size still matters for dominance.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Like, some people just have this presence, they command attention.
Exactly. There's this idea of the big man in lots of cultures, and research shows people actually overestimate the height of those they see as high status.
So they really loom large in our minds.
They do. And even in business, where being physically strong doesn't matter, studies show people see physically imposing individuals as better leaders.
It's like those ancient ideas about size and power are still in our heads.
Exactly. Oh, and speaking of brain stuff, there's another chemical involved in status, serotonin.
Serotonin, isn't that the happy chemical?
It is, but it also plays a role in dominance. Studies have found that high-ranking individuals, whether monkeys or humans, have more serotonin.
So more testosterone, Andy, more serotonin when you're on top. But what does that mean?
It means serotonin is involved in staying dominant A&D and the good feelings that come with it. And, just like testosterone, it goes both ways. Lose status, serotonin drops. Gain status, serotonin rises.
Our brains are constantly tracking our social position and changing our chemistry. It's amazing how connected it all is.
It is. But even with all this research, we still don't have a complete picture of what makes someone dominant.
It's so complex, right?
Right.
Physical traits, social skills, confidence, hormones, brain chemicals.
A real puzzle. We're still figuring out why some rise to the top while others stay subordinate.
But there's got to be some way for people to, figure out their own status, right?
There is. There's this cool theory about how we track our own social standing. Self-esteem.
Self-esteem. How does that fit in?
It's called the sociometer theory. It basically says that self-esteem is like a gauge. It measures how accepted and included we feel. So when we feel valued, our self-esteem goes up, but when we feel rejected, it goes down.
Makes sense, evolutionarily speaking. Back in the day, being ostracized from the group was bad news.
Exactly. Self-esteem is like a signal, telling us to either stay where we are socially or do something to improve our standing. And some researchers think it goes even further than that it also measures our mate value.
Oh, interesting. So, how attractive and successful we see ourselves compared to rivals.
Yep. And this could explain why men's self-esteem is more tied to dominance and status, while women's is more about attractiveness and social connections.
Wow, it all goes back to those evolutionary pressures. So fascinating. We've talked a lot about dominance, but what about submission? What about those strategies?
You're right, we've touched on some, like deceiving down and the tall poppy thing, but there's so much more to it. And one area that needs more research is how men and women differ in their submissive strategies.
Oh, that's interesting. Are there evolutionary reasons why men and women might handle being subordinate differently?
Well, there was this study about how men and women acted with bouncers at nightclubs. And guess what? Women were way more likely to use, appeasement and flirtation to get in.
So maybe women are more likely to use their, femininity to get what they want from powerful people.
It's just one example, but it shows we need more research. We need to understand all the ways people handle being subordinate.
Totally. It's all part of this big, complex picture of human social behavior.
Exactly. And let's not forget about those little ways we, knock people down a peg when they're acting too cocky.
You mean like those snarky comments, those judgmental looks, when someone's being a bit too much?
Exactly. We've got all these words for it. Arrogant, conceited, pretentious. They're like little weapons to bring those high-status folks back down to earth.
It's all part of the dance.
Mhm.
But in the end, I don't think it's about judging people.
You're absolutely right. It's about understanding what makes us tick, both as individuals and as a species.
Yeah, it's like we're all playing this big game of status, right?
Yeah.
Whether we know it or not.
Totally. And the stakes, they can be pretty high. Resources, influence, even, finding a mate.
Exactly. That's why I think understanding the rules of the game, those strategies, those little cues, it can be so helpful. Like you suddenly see people's behavior in a whole new light.
For sure. And it's not just about individual success either. This stuff plays out everywhere. Families, workplaces, even countries.
Right. Think about how different leaders can affect a whole group. Like a boss who's all about dominance. They might create a team that's scared and resentful. But a leader who earns respect through competence and generosity, that can create a team that's loyal and wants to work together.
Exactly. So understanding status isn't just about getting ahead yourself. It's about making society work better.
Well said. So before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to those submissive strategies. We talked about them a bit, but they're so important to understand.
Yeah, for sure. It's not always about being the alpha, right? Sometimes it's about knowing how to navigate being lower in the hierarchy. And those tactics, they can be super subtle. Like, think about the words we use for people who are, a little too full of
Oh,
themselves.
you mean like arrogant, conceited, pretentious?
Exactly. It's like a way to put those people back in their place to, like, damage their reputation a bit.
Wow, it's all so intricate. But at the end of the day, I think it's about finding that balance,
Yeah.
between standing up for yourself and navigating all these social hierarchies.
You got it. Knowing when to step up, when to step back, when to challenge, when to cooperate.
And I hope using what we know to create a world where everyone has a chance to thrive, regardless of where they fall on that status ladder.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, to everyone listening, pay attention to those subtle status games happening around you.
See the cues, the strategies, the power dynamics.
And use that knowledge to make your own choices about how you want to play the game.
Because in the end, the most important player is you.
Well said. This has been a fantastic deep dive into status and dominance. We covered a lot of ground today, from biology to psychology and how it all plays out in our lives.
It has been a wild ride. I hope everyone listening learned something new today about this fascinating human drive.
Absolutely. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.